What is up, guys? Dirk here. Happy Monday. It is June 5th and this is actually going to be this month's monthly update. I know it's a couple days into the month already, but here we are, and this is going to be a bit of a longer one, so make sure to get your favorite beverage, grab a cup of coffee, some water, some cup of tea, whatever you want, and let's dive straight into all the data and all the charts. I'm going to share with you what that is revealing, what I think could be lying ahead for the next couple of weeks and maybe even the next couple of months. So let's dive straight into it. Now, Bitcoin is currently trading at 26,775 as I'm making this video, but let's dive into the historical returns first. So that's always something I like to look at. You can see over here, May closed at negative 6.98. So that was not very eventful. We did get a bit more of a pullback. We saw it go into the 25,000s level for Bitcoin, but it bounced back a little bit. So nothing catastrophic at all in May, just a slow bit of a correction, grind, and boring sideways action, which I think we're going to see more of in the next couple of weeks, but I'll share my thoughts on that later on in the video. So basically nothing out of the ordinary for May. June, again, it's just a mix of results. There's no clear red or green type of pattern, and that's pretty indicative of what I think is going to happen May, June, maybe even July. Usually chop months, so correction, yes, sideways, lower, just a whole lot of boredom, and if you try and force trades in these conditions when there's low volatility, low liquidity, mostly what ends up happening is just liquidity grabs, spikes up and down, and leverage traders just getting chopped up and losing a lot of the gains that they made from January to April when we had a nice bullish uptrend. Then my expectation is for that to continue for June and July, and then hopefully continuation later on in the year where we continue higher, because we have the Bitcoin halving in less than a year from now in April of next year, and usually that leads us going into a rally leading up to the halving and then a parabolic bullish move. After that halving, we've seen that 3 times. Hopefully we are going to see it one more time in the next 1 to 2 years leading up to this halving. So things are starting to get exciting and very promising, and I'm going to show you on the chart levels that I'm watching. But basically, as long as Bitcoin holds the 50-week moving average, that's around 22,000 right now. As long as it holds that during this corrective period, I think there's a good chance we see continuation later in the year into the halving and then higher. So we might be looking at the setup here leading into the next bull market that we might end up seeing over the next 12 to 18 months or so. And that means it's time to start taking this seriously. If you haven't yet, consider positioning yourself, considering that this might actually be some of the best times still to dollar cost average and position yourself. We might still get a bit lower in the next few months, maybe a bit of chop and sideways, but in general, looking at the overall bear and bull market, we've come down a long way in 2022 in terms of prices. A lot of prices are still way down from their highs of the last bull market, especially altcoins are still down more than 80%, more than 90% in a lot of cases, which means that if we get one more cycle, right now still could potentially be very juicy prices to dollar cost average and enter positions if we do get that massive bull market, because then we're looking at 10, 20, 30, 40, 50x from today's levels potentially. And you know, if you miss that train, and once the prices go way up, that's usually when people get interested again. That's not when you want to be wishing, oh, if only I'd paid attention, and if only I'd put in a couple $1,000 or 10,000, 20,000, whatever your risk capital is. Obviously make your own decisions, it's not financial advice, but you know, getting a 20x on $10,000 is 200k, you know, very limited downside, very high potential upside. So I would recommend paying attention to the crypto markets. Alright, so diving back into the Bitcoin chart here, we have the monthly chart, and as you can see, last month in May was the first red month after 4 months of green. January, February, March, April was green. Now, let me quickly dive into the video I made on May the 1st with my prediction there, and then I will dive into this chart and share my thoughts on the current situation. What is going to happen? And I think either way, we are going to see some trickery in May. We might not get a full-blown like crash or anything like that, but we might get a bit of a scary dip. And again, the target for the downside would be that 50 moving average, potentially around 25,000, and maybe even as low as 23,000 is a possibility. I will show you in a second. That's basically the 50-week moving average. As long as the price stays above there, any correction is still fine in my opinion. Okay, so I said it was likely that we are going to see some sort of trickery in May, and we did get a red month. We did see a bit of trickery. We actually went below 26,000. We bounced back a little bit from there, so it wasn't a scary crash or anything like that, but we did get that. Now, what's important to note, again, the analysis stays the same. As long as we're above the 50-month moving average here in blue, it is still technically bullish, and so far we are still perfectly above there. You can see that level is currently about 25.3, and it does look like this month we're probably going to test that, in my opinion. Again, that's also the horizontal level. You can see here, I'll zoom in the charts, the time frame a little bit in a second, but that is this level 2 horizontally, so 25.3, probably going to hit it. Again, there's possibility for more downside in June and July, I do think. But like I said, as long as we stay above the 50-week moving average around 22,000, I'll show you the weekly chart now, then we are still good. In terms of upside, I mean, I think there's still chance for bullish continuation later in the year. As long as it just consolidates here, as long as that 50-week moving average holds as support, we're just building a plateau here for potentially the next leg up later in this year. So zooming in here to the weekly chart, as you can see, we have the 200-week moving average in red and the 50-week moving average in blue. And going back here all the way to 2017, you can see how much the price action stayed above the 200, right? The red moving average here. We broke below it in 2022. That was a bit scary because that was the first time basically that it happened for such an extended period. But we reclaimed that, got back above it in March this year, and that was a good sign for the bulls. Now you can see we're currently retesting it. We're sitting on here right now. Now, I do think that there is a chance that we just go below this, but that would not necessarily be the end of the bullish trend, because I think the 50-week moving average is more important, which you can see is currently here at about $22,100. So as long as we stay above this, then I think there's a good chance that we can still continue higher, and that's just the line in the sand for me, basically. So as long as we're above this 50-week moving average, everything is okay. Let it correct, you know, June and July, let it chop sideways, let it get people demotivated, let it be boring, you know, people thinking we're going back to the lows, etc., etc. As long as we stay above there, completely fine, and we have chance for just, you know, bouncing and continuing higher towards the end of July or August based on the seasonality, in my opinion, over here. Okay, so if we break this 200-week moving average, I do think it's likely the next stop is just simply the 50. Which means if we get back below 26,000, I think it's likely that we're probably going to retest like 23 or 22,000. And that's a possibility here in June. Ideally, what we want to see is early in the month, a drop to that 50, and then a recovery, so that on the weekly and the monthly time frame, it shows as a wick to the downside, push back up, and then we can continue higher. But like I said, probably the next couple of weeks, probably the whole of June, if not June and July, we're probably going to see correction, sideways chop, downwards, maybe a test of as low as 22,000. As long as 22,000 holds, I still remain bullish. And then ultimately, what I really like to look at, and this is what I've really based most of the bull bear trends on for the most part, I think it's one of the best moving averages to look at, is on the 3-day chart, the 50, again in blue, and the 200 here in red. The 50 is a very good bear bull indicator. You can see as long as it stays above here, all the way up, the bull market is in play, and it can retest it multiple times, but it is in play. It breaks below there, we see more downside. Gets above, big move up, gets down here. You can see the whole 2022 bear market basically stayed below this 50 moving average on the 3-day chart. Once we reclaimed it here properly in January, you can see we've had a whole bullish trend since then, and we are still above there. So that's going to be interesting to see, also something to watch. And you can see the confluence here, 25,000, say approximately 25,400, which you can see is also this high and this high, right? And that is also the confluence very much with the 50-month moving average. So we're going to see, it's going to be interesting. Is this going to hold here, which means not much lower, maybe 25.3, which is a very obvious support that a lot of people are watching too, right? So 25.3, if we can bounce there, great. If it goes a bit lower than that, again, as long as we're above 22,000, it is still okay. Below 22,000, I'd probably flip bearish, and then the scenario changes, and I will do an update at that point in time. But until then, it's just a matter of patience, in my opinion. Let the month of June and July play out. I'm expecting chop sideways, maybe a bit of correction, maybe a retest of 22K. So patience is key. But at the same time, if we do get that retest of around 22K of the 50-week moving average, that could be a very good swing long entry, right? Even for a leverage trade potentially, where you know your invalidation is pretty tight, right? It's basically below the 50-week moving average. And if it does hold and bounce there, you basically get an optimal entry where the upside could be 32, 35, 48,000. And if you can get in there and hold that potentially for the rest of the year as a trade, that could be very, very profitable. In the same way that it happened here, you can see how perfectly this happened. I actually called this trade on the channel well in advance. And this 50 moving average here was an optimal opportunity. You could get in here, a tight stop below it, because if it goes through it, it's invalidated. But you can see the bounce from there, from 19.6, it went to 31. So we have a similar setup on the weekly chart, with the weekly being at around 22.1. Could be a very profitable entry, a long entry there, 22.1, maybe a $500 or $1,000 stop loss, and then potentially targeting 32, 35, maybe even over 40,000. Very good risk reward. I'll actually make a separate video about that later on. So that is my thoughts for Bitcoin for the month ahead. Just a quick look at Ethereum. If we look on the weekly chart, the 50-week moving average, I think you can also use that very much to help you determine the trend, bearish or bullish. As long as we're above there, it's bullish. And if we get a new close below there, well, then time to consider the more bearish scenario. And you can see that is currently about $1,540. So if we do see some more downside in the next couple of weeks, with this month or next month, then I do see a possibility for Ethereum testing that 50-week moving average. And again, that could potentially make for a very good low risk, high reward, or good risk reward setup, where you know if it goes below there, then it's probably invalidated. But if it just comes down to test it and bounces, well, then the upside could be, you know, 2,500, 3,000, 3,300, maybe even higher than that. So again, I will make a separate video about that specific trade setup and how to approach that. But that's just my thought on Ethereum right now. As long as we stay above this 50-week moving average for the next couple of weeks, the trend is still bullish in my opinion, and we could see continuation later in this year and as we get closer and closer towards the halving, which is in April next year. So if you enjoyed this update, please smash the like button, subscribe to the channel down below if you haven't done so. And if you want to learn more from me, if you want to know how I do technical analysis, you want to learn my methods, my strategies, how to get funded trading accounts, how to trade Forex, you want to join our VIP Discord group, then click the link in the description down below. There's a free training there. It explains everything what I do and how to join my VIP program if you're interested in that. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.